Hey guys, Yulia here. So I'm going to start on pruning in the garden today, and I love pruning. I find it so meditative, and I always feel so much better after pruning some shrubs and trees in my garden. Also, I feel like I'm getting ahead of the season because there's not a lot of things that could be done in the garden right now, but pruning can be done as early as January with certain plants. So what I'm going to do today is kind of go from one shrub or tree to another and show you why I'm pruning it at this time of the year and how I'm pruning it. However, before I start, I wanted to say that there are certain things that you should not be pruning right now, like maples, walnuts, birches, because they're actively moving their sap. And by pruning live tissue, you can actually damage them a lot, and they can lose a lot of sap and bleed out, so to speak. However, if those trees have dead or diseased branches, you can prune them out any time of the year. In fact, I have this beautiful maple right next to me. I'm going to start there because it has a lot of dead wood. So let me start pruning on this tree and then we'll move on to other plants. Now, first of all, I have to identify what's dead on this tree. And usually dead branches look kind of gray and dry. And just to make sure, I break some thinner branches, and they're very fragile, kind of fall apart in your hands. Meanwhile, living tissue are very flexible. They also have buds that are starting to swell. And just to make sure that the tissue is alive, sometimes I scratch the surface of the bark, and I will do a close-up on that. And if the color underneath is nice and green, then it's a live tissue. So this particular branch is dead. It's actually dead all the way up to the trunk. But if you are not certain up until what point it's dead, you can start cutting it in pieces. And if you encounter living tissue, you stop right there. But this particular branch, I know for sure, is dead all the way up to the main trunk. So that's what I'm going to cut right now. All right, so the big piece is gone, but as I was cutting, I saw this little knob right there. I know Michael was trying to cut another piece of old wood. However, he didn't cut it all the way flush to the main trunk. So that little piece actually is a vector for disease. It can cause a lot of problems later on, so I'm going to cut that down right now. So the next plant, or a set of plants that I'm going to prune, is hydrangea. And everybody's super confused about how to prune their hydrangeas or when to prune them, but it really depends on the type of the hydrangea that you have. So this one is a hydrangea paniculata. It blooms on new wood. So if I prune it right now in early spring, it will give me beautiful blooms in the summer. Now I have another type of hydrangea in the backyard, which is hydrangea microphylla or Mophead Hydrangea. That hydrangea requires a totally different type of pruning, and I will show you that a little bit later. So let me prune this one. I kind of will zoom in and show you how I do it. All right, you guys, I hope you can see this, but the idea behind pruning Panicle Hydrangeas is to create a nice framework for these beautiful flowers to bloom in the summer. So what I like to do is to prune down previous year's growth, which is, this is what these are, down to 2 sets of buds. So right here, 1, 2. And I will prune a little bit above those sets of buds, and it will give me a beautiful framework and a lot of flowers. Here's another branch, 2 sets of buds, boom. You know, a lot of times people overthink it, but sometimes you just have to get in there, start pruning, and you'll become kind of like second nature. So right here, again, I'm not sure if you can see it, I hope you can. I have this wispy growth. This is really weak growth. Just going to prune it down completely because I do not want any of this wood here. This is a branch here that goes inside the shrub. I also do not want this because I want everything to be nice and open, more of a V shape and a vase shape rather than crowded in the middle. So I will prune this branch as well. This is another wispy growth out. This one is dead. So we're cutting dead. This one is actually dead all the way here. So I'll cut this one out. So although I prefer taking my Panicle Hydrangeas down to 2 sets of buds on previous year's growth, you can prune it higher or you can prune it lower. It really depends on what you're trying to accomplish. For example, if you have really old shrub with really thick woody stems, you can take those down all the way to the ground, and that will create beautiful new shoots that will bloom next year. Now, if you're trying to have your Panicle Hydrangeas be taller, you can prune it a little bit higher, but not too high because that creates kind of like a weak wooded plant. So there is a sweet spot, and I found like 2 sets of buds on previous growth is it. So as I'm pruning here, I found that I really do not like this branch here. So I'm going to prune it completely. I also found buckrub. I don't know if you could see this. So I gotta get out here and start spraying. They are out here. I think they also ate it a little bit. And all of the wispy growth that is too thin to support any substantial flowers, I will cut as well. Like this. Yeah, they ate this whole part here. Ugh. Here I have another hydrangea. This is Invincible, and this is arborescens type hydrangea. And these are the easiest ones to prune. You could literally take hedge pruners and not worry about any buds or anything and cut this plant in half, and it will bloom beautifully for you. So it does bloom on new wood. However, you can see that this plant is really congested. You can see how many branches there are here because this plant is really old. It's about 10 years old. So what I'm going to do, in addition of taking it down halfway, I'm going to clean up some of these branches. Okay, so after I've taken it down halfway, I'm going to cut out all of the really old branches, and I'll show you which ones those are. So you see the really gray colored branches right here. Just cut one, I'll show you. So something like this color, I'm just going to cut it out. However, I will leave anything that looks like this beautiful cinnamon color. I'm actually, you know what? As an example, I'm going to cut this one just to show you what you leave. So you see the cinnamon, you leave these branches and you cut out the gray. Leave these, cut out the gray. Some of them are just dead. cut out the gray, leave cinnamon. Cut out the gray, some of them are dead, just easily pulled out. I'm also going to cut out any thin and spindly branches. Decongest this plant a little bit. All right, as you can see, all of the gray wood is gone, and I took this plant down in half. So it will bloom beautifully this year. All right, let's talk about Mophead hydrangeas, or Hydrangea macrophylla. Now, people are generally afraid of them. They're not sure when to prune them, how to prune them, what to cut. And the reason being is that they bloom on old wood. Now, if you're afraid and you're not sure what to do, all you can do is just deadhead the old flowers, clean them up just like this, to a first set of buds, like so. And that will clean plant up. However, sometimes they need a little bit more cleanup and rejuvenation. And that is when it is important to know which branches to cut or not. So right here, I have beautiful new branch that is going to bloom. You can see it's very straight, has a lot of swelling buds, and it is also more brown in color. And then I have branches like this that are more gray and thick, that already bloomed, so I can cut them out. Here, see, they're more gray. Let me cut one that is brand new that you shouldn't cut. I'll show you the color. I'm going to sacrifice one for you. So this is going to bloom this year. So you see beautiful buds swelling on it. It has more brown color versus gray color. This is the one that is going to bloom. These are the old ones that you can cut out. So again, I am removing the congestion on this shrub here, but unlike with the arborescens hydrangea that I showed you, you do not take this plant down in half. You leave the branches that are going to bloom this year. Actually, I think this is pretty good. So again, I'm leaving all of the beautiful branches from last year here. Here they are. They're going to bloom. I also deadheaded some of the branches to the first healthy set of buds. So what's going to happen, because I cleaned this plant up, do you see right there? There's new growth forming. And those are going to be my flowers for next year. See right there? Now, if I do not cut out old wood, this all will become very congested and very hard for the plant to produce that new wood. But now that I cleaned it up, it will be easier. There's one thing that I want to point out that is kind of important about Mophead hydrangeas, is that they are unreliable bloomers in my zone. Now, if we have mild winter, it's not a problem. They always bloom. However, if we are having a cold snap, which we had 2 really cold days this past winter where it fell below 0 Fahrenheit, which almost never happened. And I usually cover my Mophead hydrangeas to protect them from cold and protect those buds that set on previous year's growth from the frost and the really cold weather. But unfortunately, I wasn't home and I wasn't able to do that. So most likely these hydrangeas are not going to bloom for me this year. And it is not something that I did wrong because I pruned them wrong. but it's just because of the weather. So I want you to keep that in mind. If you had some freaky weather event and your Mophead hydrangeas didn't bloom, it's probably because of that. If you would like to have your Mophead hydrangeas bloom reliably year after year, I would recommend that you purchase a newer varieties, because newer varieties bloom on old wood and new wood. So doesn't matter what happens, whether you have a really harsh winter or you may be pruned off a rotten branch, you will always have flowers. So I'm actually going to put some of the newer varieties, there's so many on the market right now, to purchase this coming year. So you probably heard me say many times in this video already, well, this shrub blooms on old wood and this one blooms on new wood. But sometimes it's just really hard to imagine because most of the shrubs don't show you the buds, the flower buds. However, on this rhododendron, you can clearly see the buds, right there, the flower buds for this year that formed on this plant previous year. So if I were to prune this rhododendron right now, I would be cutting all these beautiful flowers. So if you have a shrub that blooms on previous year's growth, this is ultimately what's happening. You're going to be cutting off the buds. I hope this makes sense. So here's another interesting plant pruning wise. This is Smokebush, and a lot of people prune it differently, and it really depends on what they try to accomplish. So if you prune it hard in the spring, it will create these branching with gorgeous color of foliage in the summer. However, those branches will not bloom because this plant blooms on old wood. So you forego smoke for that year. Now, I pruned this plant last spring, so as you can see, a really beautiful framework. And these branches, because this is previous year's growth, they will smoke this year for me. So I really prune this plant kind of every other year because I like to both see the foliage and then the smoke the following year. Now, sometimes people prune this shrub all the way down to the ground, which is called coppicing, and it creates gorgeous framework and foliage. I actually thought that coppicing this plant was a little inappropriate for the spot because it was a little too short. So I kind of pruned it midway. But coppicing is done if you want to see either beautiful foliage on the plant, on certain plants, or beautiful bark. For example, it's done with some of the dogwoods. Here's another shrub that I'm not going to prune right now. This is Weigela. And Weigela sets its blooms on old wood, so the flower buds are already here, and if I were to prune this, I would be pruning them off. So I'm going to leave this one alone for now, and I'm going to prune it after it blooms. Here are some other shrubs I do not prune this time of year, like this Viburnum, because it sets its flowers on previous year's growth. Also Allspice, or Calycanthus, beautiful native shrub. I did give it a good haircut last summer after it bloomed. I also do not prune a lilac because they set their flowers on previous year's growth. Here are some buds, flower buds right here. So I would be cutting them off. As for the witch hazels, most of them do not need any pruning because they're kind of slow growing. But if they do get out of control occasionally, I prune them after they bloom. So in a couple of months, if I see any suckers or any dead or diseased branches, I can prune those out at any time. So I showed you some shrubs in my garden that I prune either for beautiful flowers or for foliage, but this shrub right here, which is a holly, I prune to size control it. And I really like it. It actually blocks the ugly foundation that we have in this spot. But those wispy branches right there, they're kind of blocking my view from the kitchen window into the garden, and I really love that view. So I occasionally come out here and I just cut those branches. Now I could take a trimmer and just go and uniformly prune the shrub, but I do not like that formal look of it. I like it a little bit more natural. So I'm just going to selectively prune some of the branches. Let me show you. Now hollies take to pruning really well, and this is a China Girl holly, and it has these beautiful berries that robins actually really like, but it produces berries kind of perpetually all year long, so I don't feel bad about cutting some of these branches because more will grow and bloom and produce more berries. So what I do, I just take those little wispy branches and I cut it to the closest set of branches. So you don't even see like anything happened. See? Like I was not even here. And I just keep going. So you see these wispy branches right here? Cut it all the way down into here. And I can put these aside for the birds too. I don't have to throw them away. They'll go after them. And another one here. And like it didn't even happen. I took down about 1.5 feet or 2 from the top so I could see better from the kitchen window, and it doesn't even look like I pruned this plant. It still has a very natural look to it. All right, you guys, I know this was a lot of information, but I would say the most important factor when you're pruning your plants is to know whether they bloom on old wood or new wood. And if they bloom on old wood, I would wait until later in the season and prune them right after they bloom. Also, it is very important to have proper and sharp tools for the job. It makes it so much easier. And it's also important to sanitize your tools in between the use. And another tip that I have for you, if you are pruning in one area and you're constantly stepping in beds and your soil, you can use either plywood or boards because the soil this time of the year is very vulnerable and it gets compacted very easily. So I highly recommend just laying something out there and stepping on that instead of soil. Anyway, thank you so much, you guys, for watching today's video. Just go out there, start pruning, enjoying yourself. It is such a peaceful and meditative activity. Anyway, thank you so much, you guys, for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye. Hey guys, Yulia here. There's how the planes identify what's dead on the Should I just not bother with the planes? I mean, I don't know. The light is not. Is the light okay? What I actually. Ooh. Like, I love two things a lot is to eat and to prune the shrub.